All righty, Taylor, we are sitting here roughly 48 hours from Liberation Day. Yes, we're recording on Monday. Liberation Day is Wednesday. And I don't know about you, but I believe that President Trump wants a recession. I believe President Trump wants a recession in Q1 and Q2 so that he could show the economy is turning from there. Because it certainly feels like President Trump doesn't care if we have a recession. But I'm starting to believe he may want a recession. What do you think of that?
It's interesting. I think your timing on things is probably right. So if it's short-term pain for long-term gain, which I think he's been very vocal about, that's his intention, and it's going to happen and a recession is going to be caused, I think he absolutely wants it to happen now.
Yeah, he wants it early. He doesn't want it in Q4. He doesn't, because at that point, let's be clear, he owns that. He owns a Q4 recession. If he gets a Q1 and Q2 recession, he could blame the other guy.
That's right? Sleepy Biden did that.
Yeah, that's just Sleepy Joe, Sleepy Joe. But you know what? What really got me thinking about this was an excellent tweet from a gentleman named Joseph Wang. He goes by Fed Guy 12. He basically said like this. It's like, guys, the administration has been remarkably clear. One of their goals is to raise $1 trillion in net new revenue. Again, according to Joseph Wang, there are kind of three ways that these new revenue sources are going to come. One, these gold cards or gold visas or whatever we're calling them that are being sold will produce nominal dollars. Number two, closing of tax loopholes on the rich and the wealthy. According to Joseph Wang, those two combined will produce nominal dollars. And then he goes on to say, guess what, folks? If those two revenue drivers produce nominal, where's the heavy lifting going to come from? And it's tariffs. And if Joseph Wang is right, and according to, I think it was Bloomberg saying we might have upwards of 25 countries get reciprocal tariffs on Wednesday, I'm starting to think this tariff thing's got some real teeth. And it could be real messy, at least in the short term. What do you think of all that?
I think that's all fair. I did my homework and listened to the Howard Lutnick
nice
All In podcast. His quote was 37 million folks around the world have the ability to have the wealth to purchase the gold card, which I thought was interesting. It's interesting. When you look at the tariffs, it is the Wild West right now. Like I was talking with my team this morning and I said, what are we actually going to see on Wednesday? And we all admittedly, and all are very well read. And we did that. We literally were like, I have no idea. We have no idea what this means. And that's the reality of what the entirety of the world is facing. And so with that, are you dumb enough as a CEO to make a long-term contract deal with someone right now without the knowledge of what the heck it's going to do? Absolutely not. So to your point of this is causing max angst in the market and max frozenness, if you will, of CEOs. I totally agree with that.
Well, let's just step it back. Because again, when I look at the U.S. economy, roughly speaking, there are three legs to the economy: the government, private enterprise, and consumers. Roughly. We already know the government's is contracted.
Correct.
We now have private enterprise essentially frozen, right?
Yep.
And we have consumers going, huh?
Yeah. And what's interesting is you have massive degradation of consumer sentiment right now. But when you actually peel through the data, so people are feeling scared. When you look at the data, you look historically, it doesn't track that well between consumer spending and actual sentiment. So it'll be interesting to see. The consumer has been the bellwether, the bell cow, the whatever you want to call it, of the economy over the past 3 or 4 years. Even through the face of massive rising rates, they've been incredibly resilient. So it'll be interesting to see if we actually get some reduction. And when you look at the breakdown of spending, so 50% of consumer spending is driven by the top 10% wealthiest folks in the U.S.
Correct. Correct.
And they have not felt any pain whatsoever. Their house has skyrocketed in price. Their investments have skyrocketed in price. But now you're starting to see the other side of that, not on the house front, but their investments now are taking a breather for the first time in a long time. And you'll see, do the rich rein in a little of their spending? And that will have a seismic impact. And I think that you are likely to see that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting because one of the things I did on my daily financial news this morning is I asked my audience, do they think Q1 will be a negative GDP print? According to a CNBC economist survey, they're actually calling 0.3%. They're on the positive side.
Yep.
And it's actually a tough call because I've actually heard from multiple people in my, call it my second network, right? Friends of friends who are actually buying ahead of tariffs. There are a couple of people that bought a car. There are a couple of businesses that bought some capital equipment because they're afraid that tariffs will go into effect on Wednesday and be, more expensive. So it'll be really interesting to see if enough people bought ahead at the end of Q1, which actually ends today, to actually make Q1 look positive. So I'll ask you, like I asked my audience, if you had to take the over under on 0, are you going negative or positive for Q1 GDP? And we're not talking the first revision. We'll talk the third and final revision.
Yeah, I'll go above just because that's a pretty meaningful slowdown from what we had seen in the last quarter. So you were in the high 2s in the last quarter, and that's just a really quick turn of Titanic type ship. I know that there are people that have front run the tariffs. I know people were also caught where other folks in their industry, I have a specific friend who runs a big metal manufacturing facility, and they tried to front run, and everyone front ran before they front ran.
So there's nothing left.
There's nothing left. There's nothing left. And you think you would be able to source metals in the United States, and there are metal facilities, but they're all supplied by Canada from the raw material standpoint. And so it's all getting hit, and they are now saying, all right, do we pass it along to the consumer or to the end buyer of this, or how much of it do we eat? And it's certainly going to be a combination thereof.
Yeah, let's rotate to the Goldman Sachs call. I'm sure you saw it over the weekend. I read it in multiple forms. They're now saying inflation's going to pop to 3.5. They're saying GDP is going to fall to 1. They're saying unemployment's going to rise to 4.5%. I can't look at that call and not scream stagflation.
Yeah, I agree. And if I had to poke a hole through one of these, and I've argued this with you, not argued, I've just brought this up in the past with you. I think the one that I don't necessarily agree with is I don't necessarily see major inflation. And let me be clear on something. Like, I get that if we tax products coming into the US, the cost of them go up. Like, I'm not stupid to that fact.
Yeah.
But I think that reality is that we are now seeing a consumer that is starting to retrench. And so I think there won't be as much competition for that underlying good driving inflation. I think it's more demand destructionary than it is inflationary. But the seeds are sown for both sides of it. There aren't that many times throughout history, right, that we've seen meaningful stagflation. You have to look all the way back to the 70s, basically. And typically it's just one side or the other really gets it. So I'll leave that. You can certainly respond to that and disagree if you do.
Well, yeah, I think it's time to really talk about stagflation because I think, again, if people want to go back and look at history, I would tell you to Google Arthur Burns and Paul Volcker. Both were Fed presidents. And I honestly think Jerome Powell is going to have his moment, and it's probably going to be July. I think July is going to be like the toughest. It's either June or July.
That's where he's going to have to decide which one.
Because if you look behind the data, the base effect for 3 months is nothing, right? It was so any positive growth is going to show inflation picking up for 3 months in a row. And I think by then you're going to see the federal layoffs start to hit the unemployment data.
Mm-hmm.
So inflation up, unemployment up, GDP certainly below trend and down, I think sub 1% in Q2.
Yep.
So I think Jerome Powell in July is going to have his moment. So what do you think? Does Jerome Powell go Arthur Burns and cut early? Like, frankly, most of the market, it is wild for me to think that Goldman Sachs just said 3.5% inflation, worse, GDP at 1%, and unemployment at 4.5%, and they expect 3 rate cuts. I'm like, are 2 different people writing this article? What are you doing? How can both those things be true?
Not for nothing, but is the Fed saying anything meaningfully different than that? They're not. They're saying inflation higher, unemployment higher in 2 cuts, right? So it's funny to see. We've been trying to make sense of the interest rate thing for how long now? A year and a half, where we've just constantly said, like, where are they coming up with this? The Fed and the market. The market's been worse than the Fed, for the record.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, the market at 7 18 months ago. So where did that come from?
Crazy. Yeah. So no, you're 100% right. And I think what you're trying to weigh there is the velocity of the 2 things. The velocity of how quickly does inflation pick up, if it does, and how quickly does unemployment pick up, if it does. And so that's where I think they're saying that they're more afraid of unemployment picking up meaningfully, being Goldman Sachs, than they are afraid of inflation getting away from us. And I tend to agree there. By the way, I have no crystal ball.
I disagree entirely. And this is fun. I love having these debates because, again, let's just say Goldman Sachs is right and we take the elevator from 4.1 to 4.5.
Yep.
I mean, by my education, and it wasn't that long ago, that's full employment, baby. 5% is full employment.
Fair.
Why are we concerned about 4.5? I mean, legitimate. Yes. A significant rise in unemployment is painful for the people that are on that list. But when you look at the macro economy, that is full employment. Why are we concerned about 4.5?
Yep. It's not the 4.5 that's the concern. It's the direction and the history of unemployment going from modestly increasing to snapping.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in that because, again, folks, if you look historically, unemployment takes the elevator up and the stairs down.
Correct.
So a rise from 4.1 to 4.5, it doesn't generally stop there. It'll go to, I don't know, 5.1 or something.
We did buck that trend. For the record, though, we did see unemployment picking up, and we were able to subdue it via whether it was interest rate cuts or just overall economic strength in general. We are officially smack dab in the early innings of a massive transition in this country. There's no way around it, and we do what I like about the new administration, and I don't like everything, as you've known. We've gone back and forth on some things. I do like the long-term view. Hey, we have real problems, structural problems that are massive problems if we continue to let them get away from us. Let's resolve those. And that is a function of a second-term president. A second-term president can take the long-term view. And Trump himself talks about the fact that China's got a 100-year plan.
Yeah,
they don't think in a long-term standpoint, we right now have a 2-year plan because the midterms come up. So our long-term is crazy short. Don't get us wrong relative to the broad macro landscape, but nonetheless, that is the function of that. And it'll be interesting to look back because as Trump became president again, I was talking with someone and we were just discussing the fact that, like, I wonder how well it gets perceived when someone goes from president to not being president to then coming back on. What lessons were learned the first time around. We're not tweet mania like we were first time around. Like that's one thing that clearly he learned. That
definitely a different team, though. He's got a bunch of Democrats, or at least former Democrats, around him.
Yep. Nope, for sure. Trump himself's a former Democrat, right?
Yeah, good point.
but I think that the reprieve and that middle period of like reflection by Trump and seeing potentially what could have been done differently and what the broad population didn't like, and correct those things.
Yeah, again, that was one of the reasons I was happy to hear you watch that Lutnick interview, because again, I think it painted a great picture of the perilous position we are in. It painted a hopeful path to the future. I think the administration is starting to lose the narrative. They've got to do a better job of communicating short-term pain for long-term gain, said simply, right? You can say those lots of different ways. Right now, everything is tariff, tariff, tariff. You could also start talking about, this big, massive bill that's going through Congress. You can remind people no tax on tips. You can remind people of these other things that will come from this chaotic environment. But, he's in danger of losing the narrative, I think.
I did a video on this the other day. I think the biggest problem that the administration has right now is I think you go to 99% of the population and say, what are we trying to get from tariffs? What are we trying to get out of this? Yeah. I think that it falls on ears that just go like this. And full disclosure, like you and I read voraciously about this stuff. Like, can I give you a perfect answer to that? No. One of the things that Howard Lutnick said in that interview that I had not heard before, and it would be the slogan of everything I was saying if I was trying to sell this administration and policy, is India has 50% tariffs on average.
Yeah.
I'm like, India is the largest country in the world by population. They have 50. If that is true, why are we not campaigning with that to get the American people on board with what they're scared to death of is going to cause massive inflation and increase unemployment and slow down the economy? We need a better job of selling out of Besson, out of Lutnick, out of JD, out of Trump as to what are we doing with these tariffs.
Yeah, again, I've been really happy that I called the first 6 months of this administration chaotic and, just chaotic. I can't think of another word. I really do hope, and again, 6 months is July 20th. So we just put a date on that. Hopefully we get clarity because again, he's gonna want to get to the midterms in a good, if not great place. And you can't be in this environment at the end of the year. We've got to have, you've got to lift this. You've got to let private enterprise rock and roll. You've got to let people understand the good that's coming with the bad. And, 2026, frankly, could be like, for how bad I think 2025 is going to be, 2026 could be the start of something, pretty good, I think.
It'll be interesting. I mean, to your point of like the midterms, Trump can't do what he wants to do. The administration can't do what they want to do without Congress, the majority in Congress. Otherwise, they can't make the decisions they want to make. So it could be viewed by a lot of people like, hey, Trump's going to still be around. Like, it doesn't matter. That's not the way
that's not how it works. Yeah. he needs to maintain majority, if not grow it. So he's really got to start. Clarity has to return. We're only roughly 80 days in. We've got another a little bit over 3 months left. But boy, it's got to get clear sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that he can continue to trumpet deregulation, lower taxes, government efficiency. I think they need work on government efficiency. Their messaging there, to be clear as well.
Sure.
But government efficiency and tariffs, they need a lot of clarity to be drawn out there to get the support of something that's going to cause pain. There's no way around it. It's going to cause pain.
All right. So let's go back to the thing I kind of diverted. Jerome Powell. In July, he's going to have that come to Jesus meeting where he's going to have to pick the economy or inflation, meaning cut or raise or stay flat. What do you think?
I think that inflation is not going to be as big of a problem. So therefore, I think it's unemployment. If inflation is in fact an issue, I'm with you that inflation will be the primary. Depending on how nasty it gets, inflation impacts 100%. Unemployment, right now, and if it picks up between now and then, 4.5% are impacted by unemployment. So you have to take the broader masses as the focal point. And that's, Volcker. Volcker did the same thing when the two present themselves. He goes, we're going to force ourselves into a deep recession. Bang!
It was a double dip. It was a double dip recession. That 82 one was nasty.
Well, we saw throughout the 70s, it was like one Fed chairman comes in, raises, cuts. Inflation, rears its ugly head. It happens again. It happened. There were 4 Fed chairmen throughout the 1970s until Volcker. And Volcker is not looked at as a villain. I think Volcker is looked at as a very positive light as to what he did. He said, we've got medicine we got to take right now. If it's me that has to do it, I'm going to do it. And we're going to right this situation. And then the 80s were magnificent. The 90s were magnificent thereafter. So from a market economy standpoint, and it was painful in the short term, though, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I think when Jerome, again, if we have PCE core at 3.5, which is noticeably higher than today, and we have the unemployment rate at only 4.5, he doesn't have a choice. He has to fight inflation. Now, if unemployment goes to 6 or 6.2, we're going lower in a big way.
Yeah. What did you? I can't remember what you framed up last week, and I was like, rates go to 0 immediately.
Yeah. I remember that as well. It's like, no, rates go to 0. I'm like, oh no, we're not doing that again. Oh, folks, go watch last week's video. Taylor, where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks so much. Find us on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on TikTok. We're at LifeGoal Investments. We put out daily videos in 60 seconds or so.
Dude, I have no idea how you get all that content in 60 seconds. You're amazing.
You're the man. Thanks so much.